You definitely need to get some bylines, because when you start writing and you want to connect with editors, editors are definitely going to want to know that you can write. They don't want to nurture you. They want you to have that expertise. One of the good things about today compared to when I started my career is there's a lot of opportunity out there. So it really depends on how much time you want to spend. If you want to spend a certain amount of time a week, you start a blog or start a newsletter if you feel like you can commit to once a week or more frequently than that. One of the good things is you don't have to write to a big audience. You just have to write. So you can start a blog, and if you have solid writing clips in your blog or your newsletter to send to your editor doesn't know if your blog has an audience of 1 or 100, or they might know if you had 1,000, but they want to see that you can write. And it doesn't matter if you're reaching a small audience at first. It's that you're putting yourself out there. If you don't have that much time and you don't want to commit to a regular thing, connect with other bloggers, and you can ask if you can do a guest blog for them. I'd recommend starting with people who are small, because people who have big audiences get a lot of these kinds of requests.
Well, hey there. Welcome to Media Savvy, the podcast that gives you a behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to get noticed by media and become the go-to expert that they keep coming back to. I'll be sitting down with successful writers, producers, and entrepreneurs to learn the tools and tactics they use to build their reputation and in turn boost their business. I'm your host, Bonnie Taub-Dix, and I've been working with top-tier media outlets for more than 30 years, anywhere from traditional print publications to online and social platforms. And I'm sharing my nutrition guidance without gimmicks. But you don't have to be a dietitian for this podcast to speak to you. Through my one-to-one conversations, you'll learn how to build a strategy to get your name in the news and establish yourself as an authority in your field, no matter what the industry. With Media Savvy, I'm on a mission to inspire, motivate, and empower you to have the confidence and tools you need to shine in the spotlight. Are you ready? Let's get Media Savvy. Well, welcome, friends. So nice to be here with you. And let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Stephanie Thurrott has interviewed me for countless stories. And one thing that makes her so different than so many other journalists is that she prefers chatting on Zoom calls so that we could see each other. This, of course, also causes us to go off on a lot of fun tangents, but these tangents have actually led to deeper connections and sometimes even future stories together. And we know from previous podcasts here that strong connections with media is what this podcast is all about. So let's dig in. Stephanie Thurrott has been a full-time freelance writer and content creator for more than 20 years, and you could find her work in publications like Today and Everyday Health. She covers health and wellness, personal growth, travel, and food, and she dabbles in just about any other topic that grabs her attention. When she's not writing, look for her work, or you can look for her running on the back roads of the trails of Pennsylvania's Lehigh Valley, or try finding the best tacos in Mexico City. She's actually in Mexico right now speaking with us. Stephanie, welcome to the Media Savvy podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be a guest on your podcast.
Oh, I'm excited to dig in today. So you've been a successful freelance writer for over 20 years. How did you get your start in writing, and what were some of your early challenges that you faced when you were building your career?
So, that's interesting. I'm one of those people who always wanted to be a writer. I was a little kid. I liked to write little poems, little stories. I learned to read at a really young age, and I just was always taken with words. And as I went through school, I was one of those students who was like, yes, I'll take the 10-page term paper instead of studying for a test. It's just what came to me. And I thought if somebody paid me to write, that would be a dream come true. And I got my first job out of college. I worked for American Express in employee communications, which is, it turned out to be a lot of time in a cubicle and a lot of non-interesting writing. And I realized I needed to maybe, focus this a little bit more. So I worked there for a couple of years. I moved out to Arizona. And luckily, when I was in Arizona, I ended up getting a job with this publishing company that really had a focus on health and wellness. And my background was in English and journalism and business, but health and wellness was always of interest to me. So that really kind of got me my start in building that background, even though it wasn't what I was trained in. Worked there for several years, ended up moving back to Massachusetts and working for another custom publishing company with a little bit of a less health and wellness focus, but it was still an interesting place to work. I was at that company for a couple of years and I got laid off. And never a great situation, but that gave me a great springboard. I had always wanted to freelance. I had been doing a little bit of freelancing on the side. And I thought, well, if I give it a go now, I have unemployment to fall back on. I think we all know unemployment isn't a huge amount of money, but it gives you a little bit of cushion. So I thought that would be a great way to get started. And it worked out for me. I would say one of the big things that helped me was I had those connections. I had worked in companies with other writers, other editors, other professionals for about 10 years before I decided to go freelance. And I would say, looking over my client list today, those are the same people. I worked with them or 1 degree removed. They're the people I worked with way back when, or they are the people who referred me to the people I worked way back when. Wow. As far as the specific challenges go, I think a lot of the challenges of being a writer are the same that are any kind of self-employed person. You're managing your own time. You have to be your own boss. You have to take care of your own schedule. A big challenge for me at first was, how long does it take to write 1,000 words? Well, 1,000 words for something that that you're writing off the top of your head is a lot different than 1,000 words where you don't know the topic and you have to interview a couple people. So you have to get better at managing that kind of stuff. And you have to be the person who does everything. I still have a client who wants a handwritten signature on a contract once a month. So I have to have a printer and print that contract and sign it with my pen and then scan it and email it to them. So when the printer's out of ink, guess whose job it is to figure that out? I'm the one sending all the invoices. I'm the one tracking down the people who didn't pay the invoices. I'm the one paying my quarterly taxes and hiring an accountant and hiring a lawyer if I get a contract that I don't really understand. And that's a challenge that never goes away. Some of the challenges are your startup challenges when you get better at it. And those are still challenges. And then a more modern challenge, I would say, is when you work for yourself and you have different clients, you have to connect with them in the ways they prefer. That means some people email you, some people text you, some people want to use Zoom, like me. Some people want to use Teams, some people use Slack. When you're turning in your assignments, some people want Google Docs, some people want a Word doc, some people have their own custom platforms that they use. And you have to at least know a little bit about all of these things, where if you work for a company, they default to Teams or they default to Zoom and you don't have to learn anything else. So as far as challenges goes, that's how I would answer that.
We could do a whole show taking apart every aspect that you just meant. And I'm like sweating here thinking about all that needs to be done when you work on your own, because I also work on my own. I have always worked on my own. There were a few years there where I hired a virtual assistant to help me with just the tech end of social media, because I always created my own content. I always have to have my own voice. I never found someone who could kind of write like me. But yeah, there's so much that's involved. And I think that freelance, that word free, just sounds so freeing. Like, wow, this is great to be your own boss. It really is a lot of responsibility. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you something. So many aspiring writers, especially who have expertise in other professions like nutrition and wellness, they feel unsure about how to position themselves as writers. And I'll use myself as an example. I'm often typecast as a nutrition expert to quote in stories rather than a writer for those stories. So what advice do you have for dietitians or even other professionals, any professional looking to establish themselves as a credible writer in their field? What's the first thing that you would suggest that someone who wants to get started as a writer needs to do?
Okay. That's a good question. And I would take a step back first and say, why do you want to write? Because the people who are nutritionists, dietitians, other professionals, you've chosen a profession, and you chose that profession for a reason. So, why do you want to write? And then why, or how does that writing dovetail with what you're already doing? I almost say, I'm taking a step back from what you actually asked, but I almost want to say it's a requirement to like to write, because if you don't like it, it's a lot of work. It's for me, I love it. So it's not a lot of work, but it's like anything, it's like exercise. Find the kind that you like to do. Don't force yourself to do something, that you don't like to do. I would say,
I just wanted to interject there that I have spoken about this on previous podcasts, but that even when I was writing regularly, a column for a newspaper, 2 columns for 2 major newspapers, I never called myself a writer. I just said I was writing because I didn't major in journalism. I was afraid to give myself that title. But I think that, you asked a very good question. And my response to why would I even want to write is because once I started writing, at that time I had a private practice where I would see private clients, is that I realized I could reach so many more people with my messages than I would on a one-to-one basis. And that was not only exciting for me, but I really felt like I was helping so many people at once. So I just wanted to answer that question of yours. Sorry, I interrupted.
So that's great. No, that's fine. And that's a good reason. I just think it's important to have a reason and not just to think, oh, I should write because other people are writing, or I should write because, so-and-so said I should write. It's a really good way, like to your point, it's a good way to get exposure for your name and exposure for your brand. And I think it's like, you don't have to be shy about it. To your point, if you write, you're a writer. If you run, you're a runner. You don't have to do a marathon. You don't have to do it every day. If you put your writing out there, and even if your audience is one person, that's okay. You're getting it out there. In terms of how to get started, part of the confidence comes from doing it. So start writing, break it out, do something, write about anything. I would say you really kind of want to find an area that you connect with your audience. If you're a dietitian or a nutritionist, or you work in the health industry, or really any industry, it's a very different thing to write for a hardcore exerciser who wants to build more muscle, or busy parents who are looking for fast, healthy weeknight recipes, or people with health problems who are looking for ways to use nutrition to solve those problems. So, I'll probably talk about your niche more later, but it comes down to, who do you want to connect with? Start writing for those people. There's good advice out there for people who they say, write to one person. Picture that person. That it can be your friend, it can be your mom, it can be, somebody who you met and had a health problem. It can be anybody, but write to that one person. And that's where you're going to find your confidence. And I would also say, just don't let a lack of confidence hold you back. Spend 10 minutes on any writing platform, and you're going to see somebody out there who is less experienced than you, but more confident, and they're jumping in with both feet and not giving it a second thought. And, because I was this way early in my career too. You're sitting there thinking like, did I write this right? Is anybody going to run and read this? Do I sound stupid? Just always. Jump in and always. Do it.
I think that imposter syndrome hits us all in anything that we do, yes. Even when we're seasoned professionals at doing what we did over and over and over again. But I think that what you're also saying is that you need to know the audience that you're writing for. Mm-hmm. So before writing, you need to become familiar with that publication or whatever it is you're writing for. If it's a company's newsletter, know who their employees are so that you actually know even the one person who you're speaking to.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's easier to write for one person than it is to write for this faceless audience. They say this for public speaking too. Just pick one person there and talk to that person. And I think as a writer, you may picture that one person, tell that person what you want them to understand, and it will appeal to the bigger audience of people like that person.
So if someone doesn't have a portfolio, what is the best way to gain writing experience without having an extensive list of bylines behind you? How do you pitch yourself as a writer? And let's say you could write well and you really want to write, but you really don't have experience. What's a good way to get started?
Yeah, you definitely need to get some bylines, because when you start writing and you want to connect with editors, editors are definitely going to want to know that you can write. They don't want to nurture you. They want you to have that expertise. One of the good things about today compared to when I started my career is there's a lot of opportunity out there. So it really depends on how much time you want to spend. If you want to spend a certain amount of time a week, you start a blog or start a newsletter if you feel like you can commit to once a week or more frequently than that. One of the good things is you don't have to write to a big audience. You just have to write. So you can start a blog, and if you have solid writing clips in your blog or your newsletter to send to your editor doesn't know if your blog has an audience of 1 or 100, or they might know if you had 1,000, but they want to see that you can write. And it doesn't matter if you're reaching a small audience at first. It's that you're putting yourself out there. If you don't have that much time and you don't want to commit to a regular thing, connect with other bloggers, and you can ask if you can do a guest blog for them. I'd recommend starting with people who are small, because people who have big audiences get a lot of these kinds of requests. So you're probably not going to get on some of the bigger sites, but you can connect with a small blogger who would probably be happy to, give you an opportunity to, take over their site for a week or write a piece for them. You can also even find small opportunities right in your community. My farmers market sends out a weekly newsletter. I bet they would be happy to have a weekly recipe and a dietitian's take on why that's a healthy recipe, or why that's a great recipe to make with the seasonal ingredients this week. Or if you have kids in there in school, their newsletter, approach them and say, hey, I'd love to once a week or once a month put this piece in here, and say, hey, here's what my kids eat at school. You can send this too. We're parents, we're connected. We're in the same community. And the last thing I would say on this one is don't forget about print. I think we kind of all think print is dead, but there are opportunities. Do you have a local weekly newspaper? Maybe they would like to have a column. They might not pay you for it, or they might not pay you much for it, but you're breaking it.
I love that. I love those suggestions. And that is actually how I got started on writing, is with a local newspaper. And the way that started was not even writing for them, because they didn't know me. I took an ad in the paper. And then after I took the ad in the paper, then I wrote to them and said, hey, I took an ad in your paper last month. How about if I write something for you? And they didn't let me write a column at first. They had me write a story. And the beauty of what happened here is that I wrote about going to restaurants to eat and mentioned some local restaurants. And then before I knew it, it was really helping me to build my local private practice. So I think that the offshoot of this writing is that if you do want to also build a business that's local, this is a great way to build a local business.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point.
So if someone is, let's say, a nutrition expert first and then a writer second, how could they best highlight their credentials while they're still showcasing their writing abilities? So I'd love to hear what you have to say about this, because again, there's that crossover between being a writer that talks about nutrition and being a nutritionist that's also a writer. Is there really a difference?
I think so. I think, editors come from a writing background. So most of the time. So they are by nature going to put a higher value on writing than whatever other credentials you have. There's kind of I wouldn't say this is 100% true, but many editors believe that you can teach a good writer enough about a topic to write a good article about that topic, where you can't necessarily teach an expert enough about writing to write about that topic. So if that makes sense. So
it sure does.
So we've already talked about how to get your writing out there. And, the more you write, the better you'll get at writing. The good thing about people, especially in your field, if you have kind of actual credentials, those are the credentials that an editor is going to look for. If you have RD after your name, you've done it. You have put in the time, you've done the work, you've passed the tests, you've taken the classes. That's all an editor needs to see for you to be an expert in nutrition, in diet, in, that part of the health and wellness field. So your credentials stand for you. I don't think you need more than that. I mean, as you build a niche, yes, you're going to want to say, I work with parents. I work with, people recovering or people trying to control diabetes. I work with people trying to maximize the protein to build muscle, whatever. But in terms of the credentials, you've got them. They're there. So now that part's done. And now you need to build your credentials as a writer.
I heard you say something once, and you said, be a writer who has nutrition credentials, not a dietitian who's a writer.
Yes.
And I think that from the dietitian's perspective, it feels great to say, I'm a dietitian and I'm a writer. But from an editor's perspective, it may not be as advantageous to have that kind of title.
Well, also, depending on what the editor needs and what the story is, you and I have done this lots of times. A good writer can interview any dietitian and get some good quotes for a story and then frame up the rest of it with solid writing. But a good dietitian might not have those skills they have the knowledge, but can they put that knowledge into a package that connects with the audience where, can they write a good headline? Can they write a good deck? Do they know how to hook people? Do they know where to put the anecdotes? Do they know where to put the research? Those are writing skills. So yes, I mean, from an editor's point of view, editors hire writers.
Wow. I love that. Okay. So as I mentioned in my intro, you've contributed to so many different platforms, so many major platforms. So could you just walk us through your process for pitching a story idea to an editor? Because I know pitching is a big question that I get asked a lot. And how do you tailor your pitches to different outlets, since we know that each publication, as we mentioned, has their own voice?
Yeah, those are two good examples because they're really very different. And pitching is important. I would say job one is to make connections with people. And slowly the more you connect with people, the more you work with the same people, the better you each understand the other person and how they do their work and what they're looking for. In the example of today.com, today is a big site. We've all heard of the Today Show. We know what that is. And that site has celebrities, they have beauty tips, they have parenting, they have shopping. I don't write for any of those kinds of things. I have my niche on Today, and those are personal success stories. So what I'm looking for when I'm pitching my editor at Today is really a story about how one person changed their life. And that needs a compelling hook. It can't just be this person lost a lot of weight, this person got in shape. There has to be like a bigger piece to it. So one that I did recently that my editor liked was a mom who had a 3-year-old daughter, and her daughter they were at the playground together, and her daughter went running off towards the swimming pool, and the mom wasn't in very good shape, hadn't really got back in shape after she had been pregnant and given birth, and she couldn't catch her daughter. And strangers had to jump in and keep her daughter from jumping into the pool. And that was the thing where the mom's like, I need to be healthier. I can't keep my child safe. I can't catch up with her when I need to. I'm not setting a good example for her. And she got fit. And people can relate to that story. That's a solid story. So that's the type of thing I would pitch to my editor. Sometimes I find those myself. I get a lot of pitches from PR people who will say, hey, my program worked for this person. Do you want to feature this person? So those are the types of things I'll pitch to her. We have a good enough relationship right now that I can just send her a couple sentences and she'll just say yes or no. She doesn't need me to kind of flesh out the whole story. Earlier or with an editor I don't know as well, I would say, yes, you want to really maybe write your deck, and then frame it. Is this a Q&A? Is this a personal one-person story? Is this a researchy story? For her, I just kind of say, hey, I have the story. And she says yes. I will also say for her and for my editor at Everyday Health, and I think this is good for your listeners to know, if they don't like it, I just don't hear from them. I don't take it personally. People can't take it personally. If it's a yes, it's a yes. And if it's a no, it's radio silence. And that's okay. People are busy. I get it, but you have to understand that.
Yeah, that's very tough. That's tough for people who don't have confidence as a writer, but also who don't do a lot of writing and a lot of pitching. So they finally get their nerve to put together a pitch and they send it out, and it's like they're praying in between. I hope to hear from them. And then when they don't, sometimes they don't, and I have counseled people like this, they don't even send out a second pitch, or they don't send it to a different publication. I myself have sent a pitch to a publication that I was writing for regularly, and then they said, nah, not our thing. And I sent it to somebody else and it got published right away. So sometimes you have to change things around, but as you're saying, you can't give up. But you do have the confidence to know that if that didn't fly with that publication, it's not about you. It's more about the story maybe not working for them or not working at that time. Because sometimes it's just about being timely.
Right. And I will say, just to go off on that, a little bit more information, it doesn't mean it will never hit, because a lot of people, myself included, when I'm the person getting PR pitches, I just file these things away. And then if I'm looking for a story down the road, I'll search my email. I'll say, oh yeah, I got that pitch from this person a long time ago. Let me connect with them and see if they're interested. And then the other thing is, just don't think of it as personal. Think of it as time management. I mean, I personally probably get 10, 12 pitches per day from PR people who are pitching me so I can pitch their stories to my editors. And if I'm not interested, even if it's a good pitch, if I'm not interested, if I write back, even if it takes me 10 or 15 seconds to write back, then they're going to write back to me because they got a response. And now I've connected with them. So now I feel obligated to write back. And now that's a minute or 2 minutes. And like a minute or 2 minutes doesn't sound that long. But then when you take 10 or 15 of those a day, and then every day, like by the end of the week, I could have done a lot of work in that ends up to be an hour or two of time. That's a lot of time for not any value on my part. So it's not personal to any of these people, but if I don't already have a connection with them, I'm just not going to respond. And I don't have the time. So people really shouldn't take it as an insult or take it as it might not be the right time. It might not be the right pitch, but it's really on my side. It's a time management issue. And I know that's the case for my editors as well. Yeah.
And this goes again back to personal connections. We can't emphasize that enough. And I know that if I see something, a query out there from a reporter that I know, I will just write back and say, hey, listen, I could help you with this story. Do you still need my help? Instead of saying, here are all the answers to all of your questions. Because again, time-wise, if they already got all those answers, they don't need my help and they don't need to read a whole email. So I think that, again, establishing those connections is really key. And also having a great subject line.
Yes.
We've talked about that before, because just like you get so many different emails. Unless it's a great subject line or someone, you may not even wind up opening it. I know I do that sometimes. I'm guilty of that myself.
Yep. Yeah. Good subject line. I do open up almost all my emails, but a good subject line pulls me in for sure. It also shows me that the person knows what I'm looking for, which makes a big difference. The case
Sure.
of the example I gave of this mom trying to catch her daughter, the PR person who sent me that pitch put like a quote from the mom as the subject line. And that was really compelling to me. I was like, wow, my kids are in their 20s now, and my heart still like thumps when I think of this mom trying to catch this little child running towards a pool.
Wow. Yeah. Makes a story that you could almost visualize before you even read the whole story.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You also asked about everyday health, and I'll touch on that one quickly because it's so different from today. And if I pitched a story to everyday health and it was intended for today or vice versa, it wouldn't even make sense. Those tend to be more researchy. They want expert quotes. So they don't want any personal stories. They don't want a quote from a woman whose kid ran in the pool. That's not the point of this publication. So for those, Bonnie, you and I have worked on these recently together. Is any amount of red wine healthy is a story that would work for them. What's the truth about energy drinks? Can you eat hot dogs at all, or are those really bad for you? These are things where you're going to interview somebody who is knowledgeable about this topic and dig into the research. Why is so much sodium in hot dogs bad for you? Why is the fat in hot dogs bad for you, or the energy, or the sugar in energy drinks, or the alcohol in red wine? They're kind of meaty, researchy pieces. So with those, I would say, yes, this is something that's kind of newsworthy. People are interested in this topic. Here's how I think we can dig in and give people the facts and the truth and back that with expertise and research.
I used to write for Everyday Health, and I wrote for them for almost about, I guess, 3.5 years. And what I wrote for them at that time was a blog. So the blog writing was very different than the articles that they're putting out now. It was really a lot of personal writing and a lot of like trends and what was happening at the time. And then I wrote a few articles for them, more like what you're talking about. And it was so different for me as a writer to write those kinds of stories and doing interviews and details and meal plans, as opposed to just a fun blog. But, a lot of things have changed in writing. And now writers, it seems these days that we're more like content creators, because sometimes we're even doing marketing for ourselves. And I know that you and I share the same love-hate relationship for social media. And we know, though, that we need to promote our stories on social media so that they live on longer than just that one-time publication. Mm-hmm. So how have you adapted to this evolving media landscape over the years? And could you just say something briefly about your feelings about AI? Because we can't have a talk about writing without even mentioning how AI could be helping or hurting writers.
Mm-hmm. I think there's, it's like they say, it's a crisis and an opportunity in terms of AI. I already see the writing on the wall with some of my work. I have editors who use AI to generate outlines for articles, and they give me the outline and say, okay, write the article from this outline, and I'll include, an interview with an expert. But AI is doing the outline, and just even in the past 6 months, it has gotten better at those outlines. So that's a big part of it. That particular kind of writing, I see that the writing's on the wall with that. That's going to be all AI before too long. It's going to be cheaper and faster and easier. So, we as writers need to find ways to both use AI and offer value in ways that AI does not. The pieces I write for today, that's a one-to-one personal connection. I sit down with somebody on Zoom and I interview them for, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. They connect. And if I write well, this probably kind of sounds bad, but the people that I really connect well will cry when I interview them because they've hit on something that's so meaningful and close to their heart. And when they do cry, I know that I'm getting to the heart of a story, and that's not something AI can do right now. And I don't think it's something that AI is going to do really soon. So it's
Yeah.
that kind of personal, authentic connection is where writers can position themselves. And then I think you can use AI. I mean, honestly, you could say, hey, ChatGPT, give me 10 blog topic ideas, for, busy families that need healthy meals on weeknights. And you get 10, probably 5 of those are going to be pretty good ideas. And then you can say, okay, of those 5 ideas, I want 5 more that are only vegetarian or that are low carb or whatever. I mean, there's some benefit, like AI can do some thinking for you that can really streamline your process. So, look for ways that AI can make you work faster, and then look for your own ways to add that authentic human connection.
Yeah, I think that if we look at AI as an assistant, or I heard someone last week call AI an intern. It's helpful to have someone do research for you, but that doesn't mean you let them give the presentation for you.
Exactly.
So I think that you have to really be careful about what you also get from AI. And one of my kids told me that I should look up my own name on AI and from my bio. And I did. And I was really impressed with a lot that I got out of there, even changed my own bio because of it. But they also said that I graduated with honors from Queens College and I never even went there.
Yes.
So,
right.
You just have to be careful about what it is that you're saying. When it comes to you writing stories, you talk about personal stories. And I know that for myself, when I counseled patients in person, I always kept tissues in my office because many of them would cry in a good way. But when you're balancing personal passions and professional writing, it could be tricky. So how do you decide which stories to pursue and all the diverse topics that you cover, especially from health and wellness? It could be travel. It could be food. It could be, best gift items. So for people who are aspiring to be writers, how do you help people decide what to write about?
So that's kind of a 2-part question in a way. Because for me, I'm a full-time writer. I've been a full-time writer for a long time. And for me, it's a job. It's hard. We talked about being your own boss and working for yourself at the beginning. It's really hard when you're self-employed to say no to a job because you have probably had experience in the past where you didn't have enough work, and you remember that and you think, okay, I need to make sure I say yes to almost everything. I probably shouldn't have done this, but I took a look at my tracker that I use to, keep all my assignments in order. This morning, I have 47 stories in the works right now for 6 different clients. Then that's pretty typical for a month span. Some of these are.
What do you use as a tracker?
I use Trello. I use a program called Trello, or a site. I guess it's a site and an app. And it basically, I organize things like assignments that I'm just getting started on. I might be like setting up the interviews that I don't have yet. And then the next column over is things that are ready to write that are organized by the deadline. Then the next column over is things that I am working on, which I try to just keep like 1 or 2 things in that because that gets really overwhelming if I, prioritize by when it's due. And then the next column is things that I am waiting that are basically finished, but are out for review, or, I might, if I just need to invoice for them, I put them there, or the today's stories I send to the person who I interviewed to make sure they're happy with them. So they could be with them. And then the last column is like done. So they kind of move their way across.
It's so incredible. This really goes back to what you were saying as being a freelancer and how it is really not exactly freeing when you realize that so much of your time is spent on organizational skills. Never mind writing skills, but even just being able to do this is something that is not for everyone.
Right. Yes. I'm always afraid that something's going to fall through the cracks. I'm always happy to hear from an editor who says, hey, just checking in. Is this going okay? Because that makes me realize like, oh yeah, I didn't, I don't usually forget things, but I like to just make sure that I don't. So,
if someone out there really likes to write, but wants to improve their writing skills, where to put the comma in the right place and does this go in the beginning of the sentence or the end of the sentence? Things like that. Are there any programs or anything that you would recommend for someone to actually improve their skills?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're not that confident in your writing or you're not sure how well you're writing, I think Grammarly is good. I used Grammarly for a long time, and then it has a few glitches in it that I don't personally like, that I found frustrating. But it really does kind of say, okay, this sentence is clearer if you reverse it. So you get rid of the passive voice. You don't say the cat was chased by the dog. You say the dog chased the cat. That's clearer and easier. And, my example sounds a little silly, but when you have a long sentence, you might not catch it. I think a big problem for a lot of writers, and I've helped some of my own kids and my nieces and nephews with this. You go to school and you learn how to write academically. And academic writing is formal and detached and impersonal. And then when you want to write professionally for an audience, you need to forget all that and do it differently. And programs like Grammarly can help you, make it more casual. It's okay to end a sentence with a preposition. It's okay to start a sentence with and or but if it works for your audience and your editor. So yeah, Grammarly is good. It's frustrating because as a professional writer, I'm like, nope, I don't agree. So, but when you're starting out, it is helpful. It's probably worth paying for a year. I think you have to do a year. I don't think you can do it for a month. And you would learn a lot, and then you can stop paying for it. I would hunt around for 50% off. I don't have any codes to offer or anything, but I wouldn't pay full price for it. But it does definitely help.
And that's funny that you're saying about, you could end a sentence with a preposition. I remember when blogging first became popular, and I wrote my first blog, and I was almost a little afraid because I did start sentences with and but, and I just wrote a story that sounded like I would be talking to someone.
Exactly.
And no editor made any changes. It was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I got away with this. But it really is the way that I like to write. If I got an assignment from a journal that was super scientific, it would really not make me happy because I really do like to write like I speak. So I think that, again, knowing your audience will also give you a better clue about how you could write. It still doesn't work for everyone, but it's really how I prefer to write. And I also, sometimes with following trends, whether it's a trend in how you write, like blogging versus something scientific, or a trend that's happening for writers that are looking to break into the wellness area. What trends do you see growing and that we should be paying more attention to?
We talked about AI, and I definitely think that's not even a trend. That's a cultural shift. So
as you say, the writing's on the wall.
Yes, exactly. The things I see coming up a lot lately in that area are the weight loss medications. People are, more and more people are taking these medications. I know they originally came out for diabetes, but now they're kind of broader. That market's going to keep growing. Those medications are going to be, if they're not yet, oral versions are coming out soon. That's going to broaden the audience for that. People are always going to be starting to take these medications in the short term and then continuing to take these medications. And they're going to want to know how it affects their health. When can they make changes? What can they eat? What can't they eat? Tied in with that is kind of the whole food as noise in your head thing, because a lot of people who take these medications find that it dials the noise down for them. And, how does that work? And how does that change your life? That's a big thing for people. What do you do with that space in your head when it's not filled with thoughts of food? I think another trend is I think people in your field have seen this for a long time, but I really think it's getting out to the broader audience, is obesity as a disease that is separate from your body weight. And you can be a bigger person who is healthy. You can be a smaller person who is not healthy. And you're kind of separating weight from health. And, yes, dietitians and nutritionists know all about this, but does my mom? I don't think so. you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think another topic is food as medicine is something that is a big topic now. And
Yes.
the interesting thing about trends is that during the pandemic, no one talked about weight loss. It was really, all of the interviews that I was getting was really much more about comfort foods and maybe how to protect yourself from getting the flu or getting sick and what to eat when you are sick, stories like that. But no one talked about weight loss. And then after the pandemic was over and we were getting a little towards the holidays and then New Year's resolutions, everything seemed to come back with a vengeance. And now, as you're saying, of course, with these drugs, we're hearing more and more about weight loss. I think you're going to also be hearing a lot more about malnutrition with those who are taking these drugs, because I think a lot of people are just so happy to not really want to eat, or as you say, fulfill that noise in their heads that they're feeling like, okay, as long as I'm losing, it's okay if I'm not really eating that well. I'll get back to that eventually, but you really have to protect your body in the meantime. So I think it's, some interesting trends coming up.
And I think in terms of your trend of food as medicine, I think we're really seeing people looking at longevity and their lifespan and their health span, not just living a long time, but living well until close to the end, not living from your 60s till your 80s in poor health and poor mobility, but really using food as part of that, using exercise, using sleep, using stress management. How do all of these components come together to give someone not just a long life, but a healthy life? I see a lot of interest in that now.
Yeah. And besides trends, I think it's also just so important that we write about something that we know and we write about something that we like. And hopefully, as you were saying before, something that you could really relate to. And one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, which I found to be so interesting, is that I know that you have a cool Substack and that it is very different than a lot of the health and wellness topics that you often write about. So could you just tell us a little bit about what your Substack is?
Yes, I would be happy to. About 3 years ago, my husband and I started visiting Mexico City. We had spent a lot of time visiting Europe, which is aside to, part of the ups of freelancing is you have freedom. So I can work anywhere there's an internet connection. And I've been able to work wherever, being able to travel a lot because of that. We ended up falling in love with Mexico City and very impulsively and very out of character for us because we're typically, connect the dots and follow the rules kind of people, especially with our finances. We bought an apartment 2 years ago and we're kind of working towards splitting our time between Mexico City and our home in Pennsylvania. So we started a Substack a couple months ago, really just highlighting like what we've learned, because when we were trying to find a place in Mexico City and spend time here, there's a lot of was I wouldn't say it's not there, but it's hard to find. So we were like, from how you buy an apartment to how you pick a good restaurant, like what do people need to know? And it's so fun because we like it. We like spending time here. We like going to the restaurants. We like the people. We like the sights. We like the weather. We like the culture. So we're taking all that passion that we have for this place and putting it into our Substack. And will it succeed or fail? I don't know. How do you judge success?
That's a question. That's a question I was going to ask you, is like how you know whether it's successful or not. And it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking to help a small group of people who want to go to Mexico City and you have really given them so much fuel for their trip or their adventure, then I call that successful. Some people I know monetize their Substacks, and for them, money coming in on a regular basis, that's successful. So I think it really just depends upon what you're looking for, and it doesn't even have to be one or the other.
And we're using it also. We're both writers, so that helps. It gives us a good solid start from this. I will say we're using it as a frame for a book, a travel book on Mexico City. So we're kind of, I wouldn't say quite serializing because we're not doing it in a sequence, but we're putting stuff out there on Substack that we will use in our book. And, are we monetizing it? Yes, we are. We have free and paid subscriptions. I will say we started doing this kind of content as a YouTube channel, as we were going through the process of getting the apartment in Mexico, and in a month on Substack, we made more money than we did the whole time we were doing YouTube videos. And both of those are small amounts. So I don't know that it's a sign of how well Substack's going to do, but Substack does give you a lot more control over what you put out there, and it's easy to use. And if anybody out there, I don't get paid. I'm just a fan of it. It's easy. You can do writing, you can do video, you can do podcasting, you can do like kind of short type social media things. So, it's just, if you want to get started and you want an easy way to play around with it, it's a good place to start.
It's on my list.
I know we've talked about it before.
I know. This is what I mean by our tangents when we have our interviews, is that we've talked about this. And I have, 3 newsletters that I do right now. And I'm just wondering if I could just combine them all into a Substack, how nice that would be.
There you go.
We'll talk more about this.
Yeah.
I may have to have you on again for a tutorial on Substack.
Right.
So, in looking back, I have 2 questions that I love to ask all my guests, that if you had a chance to send a message to your younger self, what message would that be?
So I've listened to some of your podcasts, and I knew this question was going to come up, and I wanted to think of something really like inspirational and high-minded, and that people would take away. And then I just got the practical side of me came up, and I want to say, take care of your health. And I have done that, so I don't have to tell my younger self that and, wish I had done that. But first of all, it's not just for the obvious reasons that we've already covered here. It's for very practical reasons that if you want to do this professionally and you live in the United States, there's a really good chance you're going to be buying your own health insurance. And it's going to be crazy expensive, and you're going to have a high deductible. And if you get to be in your 50s like I am, and you have a high deductible, you're going to be shelling out all this cash if you are not taking good care of your health. And I know there's no guarantees. You could get hit by a bus, you could get cancer, whatever, like things happen. But the more you do to take care of yourself, the less you're going to be faced with those expenses. And of course, you're going to have a better life too. But I don't know. When I was thinking of this in the context of being a professional writer, that's the advice that came to mind.
Wow. All I want to say is I have never heard anyone use that as a response. And yet it is the one thing that I know that for myself that I talk about all the time with my clients is, my father's favorite expression is health is wealth. And it really is so true. So if you're not healthy, we wouldn't have this podcast. We wouldn't be able to talk about any of the things we talk about, and you wouldn't be able to do all the things that you like to do. So I really do like that response so much, so much. It's funny because I have never thought about what my own response would be to that question. And and I think that my response probably would be that I should have planned more, because I didn't really plan. Things just happened to me, which then makes me think about, why would I have to plan more if I was lucky enough to have things happen to me? But I know that a lot of people often talked about like having a business plan and having goals. I never did that.
I didn't do that either. It just, life happened, I used the phrase recently with my husband, reactive travel, because he has a lot of opportunities to travel for his job. And then I'll just come along and it's like, okay, we went to Dallas last month. Probably wouldn't have gone to Dallas if somebody wasn't sending him to Dallas. But, there you are. We didn't plan it. We just ended up there.
Yeah, I agree.
We kind of ended up in Mexico City because it was post-COVID and we only could go to certain places. So the world got smaller and we had to pick from a small list.
You never know. You really never know. And also, if you believe in, things are meant to be, I think it's kind of interesting. So a question about writing, though, is what is the one piece of realistic advice that you would give to someone who wants to write a story and then see it go to press?
I would say there's the magic and the beauty of writing today is that there's so much opportunity. When I started out, there was really only print, and to get yourself published in print, there were gatekeepers. You couldn't just get yourself out there. You really had to climb over a lot of hurdles. And I mean, today you can just sit down at your keyboard, you can sit down at your phone, you can sit down and dictate into a recording app and transcribe it. You can just get started. That can be a blessing and a curse because there is a lot of noise to break through. Everybody can do this, so a lot of people do it. But if you can say what you want to say with skill and authenticity and expertise, you'll find your people and you'll find your audience.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know what to say because I'm not surprised that this became a conversation where I could literally talk to you for another hour or so, just like our interviews. And I look forward to the next interview. But I just really want to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us about your own media journey and for really great tips for people to do if they really want to get started on writing. And I'd love to say to my listeners today, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for joining on our media journeys. And remember that it's not just about getting your name out there in media. It's also connecting with your audience and connecting with the people that will carry you further along. So be sure to tune in next time. I hope that you will tell your friends about this show. I hope you'll subscribe to the show. I'd really love to know your comments. And if there's anything that you'd like to say that you'd like to see changed about this or added to our show, please let me know. You could reach out to me at BTD Media on Instagram for some more tips about working with media. And don't be shy. Send me a message if you have a question for me. And what I really want to also say is that you are looking mighty media savvy today. So thank you so much for joining us. And goodbye for now, and I'll see you in the spotlight.